Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to the launch of the book, Unconquered Horizons, Southern India's Resistance Icon. The Madras Management Association is jointly hosting with us the Colors of Glory Foundation. I am Samyukta Vijay-Shankar, your MC for the event. Before we commence the event, please bear with me for a few minutes while I profile our foundation for the benefit of those in the audience who may have not attended our prior events. Our country has any number of heritage organizations for almost every sphere of human activities, be it art, literature, politics, or any other. Somehow, warfare alone does not enjoy this privilege, despite the fact that we have a rich military past, which few countries in the world can match. This is an anomaly that our founders set about to rectify 8 years ago by raising our foundation. We have come a long way since, carving a niche for ourselves with drive and dedication. Let me play a 2-minute audio clip that eloquently conveys the essence of our mission.
Soldiers in the army fought overseas during 2 world wars, and 150,000 of them perished. The origin of that army, which constituted the largest voluntary force in each of those wars, dates back to the 1700s, when the English East India Company, EIC, began recruiting sepoy levies in the Carnatic and Gangetic plains, and later in West and Northwest India. Initially raised as 3 presidency armies, Madras, Bengal, and Bombay, they were later amalgamated to form a single one that, through years of constant battling, molded itself into a magnificent fighting force with few equals in the world. Following the trend, a sea arm took shape which was eventually to form the Indian Navy. Its genesis marked by the induction of Indian sailors into the Bombay Marine, a force created by the EIC in the early 1600s to protect its coastal influence. Then, over the years, as aerial combat evolved, Indian flyers also took to the skies, the fledgling Indian Air Force cutting its teeth in the bloody frontier wars of the Northwest, in which were once engaged the Royal Flying Corps. The gallant traditions of unflinching courage under fire, these intrepid soldiers, sailors, and airmen, wove in blood, continue to inspire their worthy descendants in India's armed forces, who have risen to the occasion time and time again since independence to write their own chapters of valor and sacrifice while defending their nation's integrity. Yet, the country at large remained very conscious of its prowess in arms and glorious military heritage. Even the many glorious Indian feats of arms after independence, from Sojila to Bombila, and Pigola to Bogda, and Bafanta and Hyderabad, have already faded into obscurity in the country's collective consciousness. Colors of Glory seeks to fill this gap by promoting awareness of India's proud military heritage, while popularizing literature and art forms with a military theme, opening vistas of military tourism, and memorializing battles and war heroes.
That being our mission, let me treat you to some of the glimpses of the road that we have traveled so far, hosting multiple events in a 3-minute video clip. That's only part of the story because it covers mostly the outdoor activities and not the indoor events like talks, presentations, and the innumerable virtual events we conducted during the pandemic and we continue to host. We are now spreading our wings too with outreach programs, the first of which we hosted at Bangalore last year and are poised to host our second later this month. We have a pan-Indian membership base and some overseas members as well. We invite those of you who are not members to obtain a membership and be part of this unique initiative. An annual membership costs only 1,000 rupees and a lifetime membership 10,000 rupees. Our membership is unique to its feature where the spouse of the member gets automatic membership. Our volunteers outside will be happy to explain the modalities of obtaining a membership and the benefits thereof. We look forward to seeing many more of you into our fold. Thank you. I now invite our dignitaries for the day. Our chief guest, Dr. Nanditha Krishnan, who will chair the meeting and formally launch the book. Air Marshal M Matheswaran, our special speaker for the event. Real Admiral R.K. Dhingra, the guest of honor who will receive the first copy of the book, and the author of the book, Captain D.P. Ramachandran, to take their seats at the dais, please. May I now invite Group Captain R. Vijay Kumar, Executive Director, Madras Management Association, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's indeed my privilege, pleasure to be there because when Colors of Glory, Captain Ramachandran asked us to collaborate, we can't say because he's doing some phenomenal work and I've seen how passionate he is doing about not only showcasing some of the best armed forces achievements, soldiers, veterans, but also other areas of interest. That is what is the unique thing about Colors of Glory. And we are indeed privileged to join Colors of Glory in presenting another outstanding book written by Captain Ramachandran, and we are indeed privileged. It's my indeed a great honor and privilege to welcome the distinguished guest for this evening. Captain Ramachandran is another co-host with us. We have got Nanditha Krishna madam, and she is again known thing that she'll be introduced formally. And Air Marshal Matheswaran, he is not new to MMA and other members. He is one of the finest officers of Indian Air Force. We do a lot of work together with the Peninsula Foundation, which he heads, and Rear Admiral Dhingra, Visit Seva Medal. Pleasure to have you with us this evening, sir. Very warm welcome to each one of you. Let me also welcome all the members of Colors of Glory and also members of Madras Management Association. Other invitees who have joined us this evening. It's a privilege to have you with us at this complex Madras Management Center. And would like to see you more often here at MMA. And you know, MMA has got state-of-art complex. We got 24,000 square foot. We do some 700 events in a year, and we got about 10,000 members. And we have been declared as #1 management association in India for the last 14 years, including for the last year. All this could be possible because of large number of membership base support what we have. We got state-of-art library where we got 1.25 million research papers, case studies, e-books, and we have our own publication, monthly digital magazine. We also publish our own books. We do a lot of activities. And if you have inclination to come and really enjoy the management thoughts and get inspired, please come and do join us. It will be a privilege to welcome you to the fold of MMA, and you really enjoy being at MMA. Let me also warmly welcome all the viewers watching this program live from all our social media portals, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and also our more website. And if you have any questions, as usual, the numbers on your screen, please send your questions. I will pick up all the questions and place it before distinguished panel for this evening. They agreed to respond to all the questions. Only request you to focus the question what is relevant to the theme being discussed, relevant to the book what is being discussed. Because at times we get so many questions which is not really relevant to it. But if you have otherwise you have some questions, you can always meet the speaker and get it clarified. And also I would like to welcome the management students who also joined us this evening. And when Captain Ramachandran mentioned he going to be writing the book, and I said, let's launch it one year at MMA. It was even written when he was writing the script, and that time itself is agreed to do that because I was really happy Unconquered arisen. And it's all about leadership, and what we are going to be talking today is all outstanding leaders who will be talking about the concept and what has happened. The thing, because leadership is one concept which we always tell the MBA students that whatever you want to learn doesn't stop in the moment you pass out of the portals. The management lesson starts once you step out, and it will be a continuous learning. And we tell them not management journals alone doesn't teach you a thing. You also learn from so many other publications like this, what Captain Ramachandran, where you learn a lot of things. It will really sharpen your mind to be more smart and more focused, more strategy towards all the endowment what you are going to do. Once again, I thank Captain Ramachandran for choosing MMA to host the book jointly with the MMA, and it's a privilege to host this along with Colors of Glory. Ladies and gentlemen, sit back and enjoy. The books are available outside. I think it's a good book to get and all of it and easy read. Thank you so much. Once again, very, very warm welcome to each one of you.
Thank you, sir. I now have the honor to introduce our 4 dignitaries on the stage. Our chief guest for the day, Dr. Nanditha Krishna. Dr. Nanditha Krishna is a versatile personality who has left her imprint in multiple fields. A Chennai-based historian, environmentalist, and author, she holds a Ph.D. in ancient Indian culture from Bombay University and has been a research guide at the CPR Institute of Indological Research, affiliated to the University of Madras. She is also the founder of CP Art Center, CPR Institute of Indological Research, and CPR Environmental Education Center in Chennai, as well as the Shakuntala Jagannathan Museum of Kanchipuram. This is apart from several educational institutions. She is currently the president of CP Ramasamy Iyer Foundation. She has been responsible for the revival of Kurumba painting, Kota pottery, and traditional drawing and painting in Mambalapuram, as well as introducing Tamil folk art forms in schools. Her achievements include the restoration of the Varashishwara temple in Damal and a 450-year-old house in Kanchipuram. Furthermore, she has pioneered the documentation of India's ecological heritage traditions. She has authored numerous books, 23 in all, on an array of topics varying from Indian art, culture, religion, and environment to sacred animals of India, sacred trees of India, Hinduism, religion, and besides Madras, then Chennai, and Madras Chennai. A tireless worker, has also produced several research papers and popular articles. Dr. Nanditha Krishnan is a recipient of several awards, including the Devi Award, Nari Shakti Puraskar, Sri Ratna, an Outstanding Woman of Asia, and a D.Lit from Vidyasagar University, West Bengal. She has recently been awarded the National Fellowship by Indian Council for Historical Research. Honor to have you here, ma'am. Next we have Air Marshal M Matheswaran, AVSM, VM, Ph.D. veteran, Chairman and President of the Peninsula Foundation, Chennai. Air Marshal M Matheswaran is a distinguished Indian Air Force veteran with 39 years of service, an exceptional fighter pilot, an experimental test pilot, and he has held key roles in defense strategies, R&D, and space strategy. He retired as the Deputy Chief of Integrated Defense Staff and is now the Chairman and President of the Peninsula Foundation, a public policy think tank in Chennai. He holds a Ph.D. in Defense and Strategic Studies and is a Senior Fellow at the Harvard John F. Kennedy School of Government. Honor to have you here, sir. Next we have our Rear Admiral R.K. Dhingra, VSM, Flag Officer Commanding Tamil Nadu and Puducherry Naval Area. Rear Admiral R.K. Dhingra, VSM, is a Flag Officer commanding the Puducherry and Tamil Nadu Naval Area. A navigation and direction specialist, he has served in various commanding and operational roles on the Indian naval ships and submarines since his commission in 1992. An alumnus of the National Defense Academy and the Defense Service Staff College, he holds an MPhil in Strategic Studies. Promoted to flag rank in 2023, he is a recipient of the Vishisht Seva Medal and the Chief of Naval Staff Commendation. Honor to have you here, sir. Next, we have the author of our book today, Captain D.P. Ramachandran. Captain D.P. Ramachandran is a distinguished war veteran and an accomplished military historian who has authored 4 books and numerous articles on military history. He is the founder of our Colors of Glory Pioneer organization in India, which promotes the awareness of a country's rich military heritage. Now, this has carved a niche for itself in multiple outdoor and indoor activities, as already said. So, thank you, sir. Yes. And all his numerous books are mentioned and, they are at a special launch price and they've been sold outside. And I now invite Captain Ramachandran to introduce his book.
Madam President, other dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me express my deep gratitude for all of you being here to laud my humble effort. This book has a genesis in the feeling of utter humiliation I was tormented by when I was growing up as a young boy in the 1950s. The history I learned in schools said of an India that is subjugated by much smaller foreign country, European country, in fact. How could foreigners come here and lord over us was something my young mind couldn't really comprehend. The sense of shame was so intense, I used to get my father riled up, telling him that your entire generation was full of cowards. he would defend that he never served the British, what was only in the service of the Maharaja of Travancore. So I pushed it further, telling him that Travancore, a princely state though, had accepted British supremacy, I would get some arbitrarily dismissed. So this, it took years of growing up and a lot of learning on our country's past before I could reconcile to the conduct of our past generations. One great consolation was to understand that we were not really cowardly, but merely disorganized. For one thing, the concept of India as a nation was still unborn. There was no central authority to hold us together as a nation. The once powerful Mughal Empire was disintegrating, and the Marathas, who had emerged as the greatest challenger for them under Chhatrapati Shivaji, had also split into factions. Add to that, we had a horde of Rajas and Nawabs, native rulers, who were so self-centered they couldn't see beyond the tip of their nose. With their opulent lifestyles and internecine quarrels, they were the greatest villains in the colonial drama. They sort of laid out the red carpet for the colonialists. I wouldn't even blame the British as much as I would blame these characters. The British, after all, took what was there up for grabs. If anyone showed a modicum of self-respect in that era of disgrace, it was these personalities which I've tried to portray in this book, at least as far as southern India was concerned. I'm sure there were like-minded individuals who lived elsewhere in India also, but southern chapter was unique because nowhere else in India the British faced such stubborn resistance from ordinary people. They were indeed led by the exceptionally noble native leaders of the kind who loved who cared for their people and loved their land of birth. These narratives of resistance somehow don't find place in the general narrative of the history of India. Our historians, even after independence, followed a narrative which was espoused by the British. That narrative was meant for the shareholders of East India Company in England, painting rosy pictures of British victories, starting with Plassey. Plassey was no battle at all, as a matter of fact, unless you want to call a battle where the enemy generals were bribed off to desert the battlefield as fair tactics. Then otherwise it's no battle. The entire north was a cakewalk for the British. In contrast, they had to fight half a century of bloody battles to subjugate the south and the whole of peninsular India. Even that period, their history highlights the defeat and killing of Tipu Sultan and overcoming of Maratha Confederacy. In the clamor of that high-octane wars, this innumerable movements which took place, struggles which took place in the south, gets obscured. These resistance fighters, I came to know, or rather, it was while I was researching for the history of the South Indian soldiery, the predecessors of today's Madras Regiment and the Madras Engineers and some cavalry and artillery regiments of southern origin of the Indian Army. That's when I came across these magnificent men and women who valued their honor more than their lives. I felt it was sacrilege if I didn't tell their story. Of the 15 personalities I've chosen, only 3 of them died of natural causes. 10 were either killed in action or executed. 1 was killed in a bid to escape. 1 was tortured to death while incarcerated. That speaks volumes of their sacrifice. I feel their immortal spirits loom large on India's horizon, inspiring us and our generations to come. That's the story I've tried to tell. Thank you. Before I leave the podium, my publishers in Delhi are not represented here, but I have here the gentleman who designed my cover, the beautiful cover as you would see. Mr. Kuyar, please, if you would come over to the... I would like to felicitate him with a...
May I now invite our chief guest, Dr. Nanditha Krishnan, to address the gathering and formally launch the book.
Dignitaries on the dais, Captain D.P. Ramachandran, dignitaries in the audience, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first thank Captain Ramachandran for inviting me to participate in the release of his book, Unconquered Horizons, South India's Resistance Icons. As she mentioned, as our MC mentioned when she read out my CV, my subject has been ancient Indian culture, which means my history stopped with the 7th century AD. And I don't know that there was a world after that. But 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, for the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, the government of India contacted our institute and said they are bringing out a website on unknown heroes and heroines of India. So for that, I used 2 of my research assistants, and we collected about 440 names and put them up on the website. And that is when I realized that South India has contributed so much to the freedom movement, so much more than the rest of India. And if Bhagat Singh is celebrated, remembered for shooting dead a police officer, nobody remembers Vanchinathan, who assassinated a collector, Robert Ashe. And why did he assassinate Ashe? Because Ashe was responsible for closing B.O. Chidambara Pillai's Swadeshi Shipping Company. And he revoked his barrister's license, he arrested him, he just destroyed VOC. Vanchinathan was so upset that he shot Ashe, and then he shot himself immediately, leaving a letter dedicating my life as a small contribution to my motherland. These are the great heroes of our freedom struggle, and Captain Ramachandran has done a great service by bringing these to light. It is a sad fact that we know about freedom fighters in North India, but nothing about the freedom fighters of South India. We know everything about Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, what they did, what they didn't do, and so on. But do we know who opposed them? Who fought all these British? It's as if the Indians disappeared. That's the impression. As Captain Ramachandran said, even I, growing up in the 50s and 60s, I felt, oh my God, we Indians are so horrible, so useless, we just let them walk over us. So till I started working on this Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, I didn't know myself that Indians had contributed so much. Do you know what Madras was known as? Madras was called benighted, and historian David Washbrook says that not even a single anti-British dog could be seen in the streets of Madras. How untrue. As early as 1674, in the siege of Puducherry, the chief of the Mysore Calicut province, Sardar Ali, took siege of the British military barrack of Thalassery for 18 months. In 1780, the native sepoys rebelled against the East India Company at Vishakhapatnam. Of course, they were all killed unilaterally. In 1775, the Madras Council decided to send the 9th Battalion, stationed at Trichy, to Bombay. They refused to go, and the acting commandant, Makhdum Sahib, and his associates were blown away from the mouth of a cannon. Similarly, in 1795, the Indian sepoys of the Madras army who refused to go to Ceylon, now it's Sri Lanka, to fight the Dutch, were also blown away from the cannon. Some time back, I saw a film on the Kunjali Marakars. Until then, I didn't know about them. Thank you very much, Captain Ramachandran, for including a long chapter. I didn't know that they ran through 4 generations, and today, if there are no Portuguese in Kerala, it is because of this one family of Marakars who protected the western seaport. We had women, Rani Abaka Chauta and Kittu Rani Chinnamma, who fought the British and gave up their lives. I mean, just think what horrible situations these women would have been. They were queens, they were imprisoned. God knows what happened. Women are the worst sufferers in the war, in any war. And these women would have suffered a lot. But it was in Tamil Nadu that the anti-British revolution really began and was ferocious. Pulithevar, Rani Velu Nachiyar, Kattabomman and his brothers, the Marudha brothers, Thiran Chinnamale, all of them gave up their lives rather than submit to the British. I think you all know the story of Rani Velu Nachiyar. Her husband was killed in 1780. She went away from Shivaganga, where he was the Raja, and for 8 years she planned, built up a 4,000 strong army of women and its commander Kuili. And they came back, and when they found that they were not able to beat the British in fighting, Kuili was just fantastic. She doused herself with oil and ghee and jumped into the ammunition depot of the British. It blew up. The British had to sign a contract with Rani Velu Nachiyar, and she ruled. Not only did she rule, her daughter also ruled after her. Of course, we all know about the Palayakaras or the Polygars as they are known, and Captain Ramachandran has given us many stories about these Polygars or Palayakaras. Polygar is an odd name, who protected the lives and the properties of the people in their palayams. Palayams are the region. They collected taxes, and this is what the East India Company coveted. So they got into war, and thanks to Shivaji Ganesan, the great revolt by the Palayakara Veerapandi Kattabomman, and his subsequent hanging is known. I went and saw the place where he was hanged. It's in an open field with the hot sun beating down on him. It would have been really horrible. But there are others like Pulitevar, Chinnathambi Varaguna, colored tribes who also waged battles. All of these ended in public hangings, massacres, not just massacres of the people who fought, but of all the people in that region, women, children. So, let's not talk about what is happening in other countries today. It happened in our country too. Dhiran Chinnamalai, the Palayakarar of Palayam Kotte, rebelled against both Hyder Ali and the British. But he was finally captured by an informer. And this is the story of India. Somebody, an informer, rats on you and gives you up. You all may have heard of the Great Vellore Mutiny in 1806, when the Indian Army, the British Indian Army, rebelled against the British. The Hindu sepoys were prohibited from wearing the religious marks on their foreheads, while the Muslims had to shave their beards and trim their moustache. Further, turbans were replaced by hats. The rebels killed 14 British officers and 115 men of the 69th Regiment. Unfortunately, a relief force of British gunners and cavalry rode from Arcot to Vellore. As you know, the Nawab of Arcot was a great supporter of the British. And British superiority in armaments won. As usual, some men were shot from the mouth of the cannons, some were hanged, and the rest were deported to Malaya. So I would like to just tell you about the first Indians probably who conceived of India as a nation. You have written about them, Captain Ramachandran, the Marudu brothers, Periya Marudu and Chinna Marudu. In 1801, Chinna Marudu declared, and I'm quoting, "To the castes, nations, Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras, and Musalman that are in the island of Jambu, in the peninsula of Jambudvipa, this notice is given. Wherever you find any of the low wretches, Europeans, destroy them and continue to do so until they are exported. Whoever serves the low wretches will never enjoy eternal bliss after death. I know this." Of course, after this came the Second Polygar War with some more deaths. And the Marudu brothers released a proclamation known as the Jambudvipa Prakadanam, which shook the East India Company. They posted on the Trichy Fort and Srirangam Temple a poster exhorting all sections of society to come together to rebel against the Europeans. And again I quote, "The lack of unity and friendship amongst you," said Chinna Marudu, "has led you to blame each other among yourselves. You are incapable of understanding the intrigues of the Europeans, whereby you have handed over the country to the aliens. In all the regions now ruled by these abominable people, our people are living in utter poverty. Even if one lives for 1,000 years, his death is certain. Therefore, everyone living in different palyams must come together like warriors to throw the foreign yoke away," said his poster. Unfortunately, this has been the story of India. There were several other battalions which fell, several other great names like Narasimha Reddy, Veera Rajendra Wadayar, and so on, whom I only learnt about from your book, Captain Ramachandran. You have also written about Dhondia Wag, Parasi Raja, and Velu Tampi. We know some of the stories, but we do not know what all they went through. You have done a great service in bringing out this book, and my hearty congratulations to you. Since there are so many people from the army, and we have a rear admiral also, may I request you all to use the army's influence and I know you have a lot of influence, to include them in NCRT's social science textbooks. Our textbooks should have it. I mean, I grew up studying about what the British did to India. My sons learned the same thing. And even now I run schools. The textbooks that we have still tell us how great the British were and how useless we Indians are. So may I request you to please use your influence and make NCRT and the state governments include them in their social science textbooks. I'm buying these books for all our schools' libraries. But I know, and I think you all will agree, for every one child who reads a book, 5 or 10 children don't read. And especially with TV and social media today, less and less children read books. So instead of wasting time studying about Robert Clive and Mir Jafar, they should be studying about our great heroes who gave up their lives for this country. Thank you very much and congratulations once again.
We will now formally launch the book.
நீ பேக் பண்ணு அவங்க பார்க்கணும் பண்ணியாச்சு கையை வைங்க கையை கொடுத்து
That's why you're so lucky.
Yes, we're looking forward to it.
May I now invite Air Marshal M Matheswaran to deliver the special address on the book.
Distinguished guests at on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, it's indeed a great evening considering the event and the subject. And at the outset, let me congratulate Captain Ramachandran for taking up this wonderful topic and then bringing out this book. Let me start with an anecdote or personal experience. In 2018, I had gone for a conference to Sofia in Bulgaria. And while before the conference, we said few of us got together, we'll see the old communist headquarters in Bulgaria. And here was a lady who had come up, and she was a doctor from UK. She was a Jew. And then she said, India must be thankful for the British for having. What do you think of the British and the British Raj that went on? I said, why do you ask that? I said, we built the roads, railways. I said, all the European colonizers who came to other parts of the world in my opinion, were all pirates. They were thieves. They looted the country. She didn't know where to look, and then she went back. Similarly, in another conference in Hong Kong, I had an Austrian colleague, and he was a nice guy. He said, I just can't understand 300 million Indians were ruled by the 40 million population from Island. I said, there's a lot. It's not as easy as that, but yes, it's happened. It's a question that we keep asking all the time ourselves. And we need to find why it happened. And that's part of the historical research that we need to do. So, as Captain Ramachandran and the chief guest mentioned, the stories of resistance in the southern part of India has been phenomenal. But to the question as to why this is not in the mainstream historical narrative or in your history books of Indian history, let me point out two or three reasons in my analysis. The first one is 1857 got the identity to somewhat that India as a nation is an identity that was evolving. And the 1850s, post-1857, that gathered momentum. And mind you, this is the modern world. It's a Westphalian nation, concept. There's a very fine seminal work done by a scholar called Benedict Anderson, which talks about what is nation and nation state. Imagine communities. Communities imagine to get together and become one, and that concept of nation is an imagined community. That imagination began, or through the 1857, it began to coalesce. And then you find the Congress being born in 1885, started by a Britisher, Alan Actavian Humes, and then the freedom movement gathers momentum. So in memory, your nation state of India as a modern nation state evolves from this period. And therefore, when history is written, or when much of the history that you've learned from the British historians and then you rewrite the history, you're still looking at the north of India and the period after 1857, and therefore you define 1857 as the first war of independence. The British will still call it a Sepoy Mutiny, and we will discuss that a little later. So that's one of the important memories. My interest in history goes back to school days, and of course a lot of novels that I've read, historical novels were my passion. So whether it's Ponniyin Selvan or Kalkis or Agilans or Napathasarathis or many of those periods I've read in the school days, and then moved on into my military career. Then it becomes a history from military history perspective and international geopolitics perspective. But the reason why this has been still a victor's narrative from the British perspective, as the chief guest pointed out, is that in school, the first question that I asked was, what is the fundamental source of our history learning? History of India by Vincent Smith. And when I read the Gupta's period, there is an emperor called Samudragupta, and he does a Digvijaya and comes down to almost the northern borders of Tamil Nadu, goes back. And Vincent Smith describes him as a great emperor. He should be called as Napoleon of India. I said, excuse me, Napoleon came 1300 years later. On the other hand, you should call Napoleon Samudragupta of France. Why is this? Because Vincent Smith, his history book was a Bible for most of our history learning. We had a fabulous library in school, and so R.C. Majumdar's 5-volume Indian history was available. And all of those 5 volumes, you'll find not more than 100 or 50 pages on South Indian history. That's it. The only book that I found enjoyable that covers some aspect of South Indian history and importance is A.L. Bhashyam's. For long, I thought Bhashyam was an Indian and a Brahmin name. Little did I know that he was a Britisher. and he was from Oxford and Cambridge. And it's a very finely written book and provides a fair amount of coverage to, particularly on the literature and the culture side, on this India as a holistic, from a holistic perspective. But let's come back to the subject again. So there were many factors that came around to create what happened in India from the 17th century onwards. The Europeans first came in 17th century. They came as traders. How did these traders become occupiers? How did these traders colonize country? And what were we? Few events, historical events must be understood quite well. This Tamil region, the southern part of the peninsula, was always fiercely combative. When you study Chinese history, before the Qin Empire comes into existence, there's a period called Warring States period. For 400 years, over 13 or 14 Chinese small kingdoms keep fighting with each other. Finally, the Qin kingdom prevails over everyone. The first empire comes into existence. The Qin emperor declares himself the empire of all under heaven. Right? He survived only for about less than 20 years. Then the Han dynasty comes in, who rules for 400 years. But the warring period produced some phenomenal giants like Sun Tzu, Confucius. All these names we are familiar with. If you go back and analyze the history of South India, particularly the Tamil region, the Cheras, Cholas and Pandyas and later Pallavas were constantly at war with each other. You had a warring states period of 2000 years, each one trying to be one above the other. But when it came to an invasion from the north, the Tamil kingdoms got together. So when the Mauryan Empire came down to expand its empire into the Tamil kingdom, Ilanjay Chennai headed the Tamil confederacy to stop the Mauryas at the Vengadam Hills. That is the history, and that is a practice that has always been there throughout history. You need to understand this. There was a very fine book, again in my school days, that I read, was Tennattu Porkalangal by Ka Apathurai. And it went out of print maybe in the 70s. Very recently, maybe about 7-8 years ago, I found an English translation is available, and now it's coming back in print. He analyzes the complete Tamil history in terms of warfare, in terms of battles that have been fought. There is a phenomenal warfare history in this region. And that was not going to let the Europeans come in easily. So what happened? Why was the fragmentation, as you mentioned? Why was so much of, the British or the Europeans were able to get through? Somewhere around the 13th century, when Malik Kafur came in, just before him, you had the Cholas vanquished by Jadavarman Sudrapandian, and then the Pandyas lasted for a while, and then they collapsed. The Cheras, Cholas, Pandyas vanished. After over 2000 years of continuous existence, they vanished. Of course, you had these fragmented kingdoms in Kerala, and the others were all smaller kingdoms. Then Vijayanagar came in the aftermath of Malik Kafur, and Vijayanagar became a fabulous empire. And Battle of Talekota killed Vijayanagar. The surviving Tirumala prince went and ruled for another nearly 100 years till the early 17th century, middle of 17th century from Chandragiri. But the result of the Battle of Talekota was the fragmentation of the empire. They were administrative units. Palayams were administrative units under Vijayanagar. So when Vijayanagar, the central authority, vanished, the Palayams became independent chieftains. And who were the Palayams? It was like the feudal system in Britain. They were the leaders of the local regions. They collected taxes, they built their forces, and they provided the forces to the central arm. So when the central authority vanished, each one was an independent chieftain, independent king. So when the East India Company now came in, you had this situation. When the Nawab of Arcot came in first before him, and then he tried to collect taxes across, he was dealing with 77 Palayams, as you actually mentioned in the book. Okay, it's a Herculean task. And he was a corrupt and a weak, governor. He wasn't a king, he was a governor appointed by the Mughals. And then the Europeans understood this fragmentation and they started now taking advantage, playing one against each other. That's how Duplay comes in, that's how Clive comes in, that's how the East India Company. So the whole starting of the European colonization is in South India. And for more than nearly 2 centuries, as the book brings out beautifully, the resistance has been phenomenal, fiercely fought, and extremely contested. Unfortunately, the concept of modern India had not evolved. And therefore, when history was rewritten or is being written, you are starting off from the point where the concept of modern India has evolved, which is post 1857, and therefore you flag 1857 as the first war of independence. But you forget that for nearly 2 centuries, people have contested enormously, and they've had a toughest time. Arthur Wellesley, the Duke of Wellington, who defeated Napoleon, cut his teeth here against these 15 chapters that cover here. One of them fought against him. All right. In later interview, towards his end of his life, in a discussion, when somebody asked him what was the toughest battle that he fought, Wellesley says it's the Battle of Versailles. And where was the Battle of Versailles? Against the Peshwas. With a much smaller force, he fought against them. And this brings about few things that the British did very smartly. And Captain Ramachandran brings that out too in one of the chapters, is that the Polydor Wars, or the Palakkara Wars, was something that lasted for nearly 50 to 70 years. Finally, when they vanquished Kattabomman, then the Marudhu Pandyas take over, Umathare and Marudhu Pandyas take over, and they carry on for another 5-7 years. And then they are vanquished. Now they do a trick. They do a trick by asking the Nawab of Arcot to invite the southern region polygars, who are about 32 of them, for a peace meeting and settle the issues, and we'll have a peaceful coexistence, is the message that's been sent. They all come here to Arcot, and they've been rounded up, imprisoned, and they were the first exiles to Penang. By one record, it's Penang. And almost a decade ago, I read a research paper written by a Chinese scholar, and he says they were the first exiles to Burma. For the next 30 years, none of them returned. One returned after 30 years in his old age, in his 80s. But this one act created a phenomenal result. What did that do? The kings or the chieftains were your employers. They managed, they collected taxes, they created avenues for providing livelihood for people. And when they were removed from the scene, the people were left without any kind of a provision for livelihood and existence. And then East India Company steps in, recruits all the martial background people from the southern Tamil Nadu and say, we will make you sepoys, you come into our employment, you'll have a guaranteed livelihood. That was the beginning of the Indian Army. That is the beginning of this entire process. So when the Austrian scholar asked me, how was it that this 40 million island nation enslaved 300 million country, I said, we helped them enslave ourselves. The Indian soldiers. We were part, the Indian army under the East India Company defeated Siraj-ud-Dawla. The Indian army defeated the Peshwas. The Indian army vanquished, under Arthur Wellesley, vanquished Tipu Sultan. The Indian army, Madras infantry at that point of time, killed all of these heroes. Right? But this resistance that has been built in, which is actually reflective of the innate spirit that existed in the people, is something that needs to be highlighted. The story of Rani Velu Nachiyar, you talk about Bharati's Pudumai pen, and this is in the 18th century. She was very well educated. She was very well versed with warfare, including war fighting, horse riding. She could speak Tamil, Urdu, French, and English. And Hyder Ali was impressed with her fluency and mastery of Urdu. And that's how we actually decided to support her. Okay, so this is the kind of a culture we had. Where is all this being explained? The martial cultures, we now understand the old cultures. We've been actually originators of martial cultures and martial arts to many other countries. Correct? War fighting has been immense here. And if you go back into now that people are aware of Cholas, there are records that are available. The first battle that Rajaraja Chola launched as a prince, when Madurandagan was the king, was made the emperor, and then he launches the attack on a small place, Kandalur Chalai, which is between Trivandrum and Kanyakumari. And people get thoughts. Kandalur Chalai Kalamarutta is the eulogy that is put in Rajarajan's eulogy there. What does that mean? So when people research into it, Chalai can mean a street, can mean a school. Kandalur Chalai was a martial training school. The cheras were a thorn on the sides of the Cholas. And the cheras were exceptional in military training and military strategy training. And Kandalur Chalai was the brainchild or the brain power of the military power of the cheras. And therefore he says, let me kill the head of the cobra and then vanquish the cheras. So this is the culture that we have. These are things that needs to be explained. Correct? And I believe Captain Ramachandran's book is the start of this process. We have a lot more work to do. But congratulations, sir, for this wonderful book. And each of the 15 chapters have been excellent. And I was very happy reading it and enjoyed reading it absolutely thoroughly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I now request our guest of honor, Rear Admiral Dhingra, to say a few words.
Dignitaries of the dais, ladies and gentlemen, good evening. At the outset, sir, heartiest congratulations on the launch of your book, and I consider myself absolutely privileged and humbled in equal measure to be a part of this launch ceremony. Doing so in the presence of this august gathering is even more humbling for me, sir. As a naval officer myself, and in the company of so many esteemed veterans this evening, to claim that the pen is mightier than the sword may not be exactly the most politically correct statement. But the fact remains that stories of strife and struggle, of war and sacrifices need to be told. So when we have an officer who turns author, we can rest assured that our responsibility towards the next generation is well taken care of. The famous war of 1971 has been documented rather well. Much has been written and said about it. Largely so because we are fortunate to have many of the first-hand witnesses of the war who have a story to tell to us. And yet, going through the pages of Captain Ramachandran's book, Legion of the Brave, I felt that weaving of fact and fiction was a masterstroke in making the narrative much more riveting, engrossing, especially so for young readers. My compliments to you, sir, for the might of your pen, without which the glorious story of the might of the sword would have possibly risked extinction. In my service of 33 years, this has been my first appointment in southern India. And I feel immense gratitude to the service and God alike for giving me the opportunity. Chennai has been our home for the last 16 months, and I can safely say that the history classes in school didn't teach us as much about the Cholas, the Cheras, the Pandavas, the Satavahanas, and the Pallavas, as much as I have learned in the land in the last 16 months years. Be it the mesmerizing temple architecture, the historical trade routes, or the innumerable stories of the brave kings of the region, the more I discover, the more there is to know. The launch of Captain Ramachandran's book for me personally could not have come at a better time. As a soldier serving in the region and as a citizen of the country whose interest in history have been reignited, I cannot wait to turn the pages of Captain Ramachandran's new book, Unconquered Horizons. And from what I've been hearing from our guests who just spoke before us, I think it would be the perfect bridge from what we have learned as history of the Cholas and the Pandavas and the Pallavas to what is actually the history of India being born. Heartiest congratulations to you, sir. May your pen keep passing down to the generation stories of war, of strife and struggle, of combat and conflict, but above all, of heroes, their sacrifices, and their ensuing victory. Finally, I'd like to express my utmost admiration and heartfelt respect for everything that Colors of Glory stands for. Military history would indeed be limited to only a handful of people, if not told to the world. Kudos to the Foundation for its selfless service in promoting awareness of India's proud military heritage. More so now, of talking about how the southern states were standing in equal measure to be a part of the India reborn. History, if not told, will fade away into oblivion. Our gratitude to Captain Ramachandran and Colors of Glory for this invincible partnership between the pen and the sword. Thank you, sir. Thank you, gathering. Jai Hind.
We will now have our Q&A session.
You can read it. Okay. I thought he read it out.
Okay, the first question is from Akshay in Hosur. Okay. What lessons can contemporary leaders and movements learn from the strategies and resilience of South India's resistance icons? How is it relevant today?
The lesson the contemporary youth can learn that we were a fighting people, as Marshal Matheswaran was saying. Our martial heritage is something which is not known. And there's a reluctance. In fact, I heard a naval officer once speaking that, the Cholas went all the way up to Southeast Asia. I mean, where all they sort of conquered. But today, we have in Tamil Nadu boys who cannot even swim. So we should get rid of that, and it's okay, you pursue whatever you want. But we should not become docile. So that is the lesson we can learn from these legends. I hope that answers.
Absolutely. I'd like to actually flag one of the important reasons why, again, these icons have been, not discussed or brought into people's memory. The British were smart. After 1857 and until 1857, much of the British Raj was built by forces that were formed in Madras and Bengal. Post 1857, they said the mutiny started from Bengal, right? And some of the loyal forces to the British Raj who quelled the 1857 War of Independence belonged to the just conquered regions in the northwest, Punjab and the Indus regions and the Pathans, etc. Therefore, they started a policy, a big humbug called martial races policy. There was nothing more idiotic than this one. But this was a divide and rule strategy. So there was a guy called Lord Roberts who insisted on changing the recruitment policy. And one of the drivers was also that there were more people after the presidencies became more open to getting people educated. There were more educated people in the south than in the north, and therefore they wanted people from the regions of the Punjab, Rajasthan, those areas. So Roberts kept insisting, and then finally in 1895, this policy is implemented. Now there is less recruitment from the south, and that gradually goes down to below 20%, and 80% are from, before 1947, the majority recruitment orientation was towards Muslims in the northwest. And then, of course, the other, Gorkhas, Sikhs, and, the regions in Rajasthan. Well, now the world knows that this is illogical. And many of the major battles, even the world wars, the Madras Regiment has played, quite an important role, in the fight in the World War I against the Ottomans, and there are many other cases as well. So post 47, Cariappa decided to change this, but we've still hung on to it. The Indian Army still, I think, has not removed this. This is one of the reasons. So I think relearning your history, researching into your history, and bringing out these stories will contribute immensely to change the mindset. Let's get out of this, colonial mindset that's imbibed, that's been brainwashed on the people for the last nearly 500 years. I think we need to get out of it.
Can I just add something? I'd like to just add what he said about this divide and rule is true in more ways than one. Because when the British came, we all in our history books are taught that the Mughals had the empire which the British took over. It wasn't. It was the Marathas who would have been ruling India but for the Third Battle of Panipat. What the British did was they found that the resistance to them came from the Deccan, whereas the states of the northwest, especially Punjab and the areas bordering Afghanistan, what is contemporary Pakistan, were all willing to be employed by the British. So they built up a new thing, which was the schooling. Now, this region, the Deccan, had a tradition. Even in Tamil Nadu, you had what's called Thinnai Palli, where all boys of all castes, not girls unfortunately, but all the boys of all the castes sat together in the Thinnai. Thinnai is the front veranda of the house, and they were taught. What the British did was stop the Thinnai Pallis, and they started schools, lots of schools, and they brought out this image that the South Indian, the Maratha and all were very studious, very educated. Good, I mean, they made them into educated people, but they said they did not fight, they were good only for study. So they made them into a group of educated people, but who did not go to war. But it was the Deccan which gave them all the trouble, if you go back into history.
Okay.
Since the martial races theory came, just a word I want to add about it, which is a subject I've been researching on a lot. You see, most of these initial wars the British waged in India, I mean, actually it was a case of the Indians conquering India for the British.
Yes.
It is not that the British brought their troops or something. And why were these sepoys fighting under them? See, our Rajas and Nawabs, which I mentioned about, they had no organized military, nothing. They will just put together a rabble whenever there's a fight between them. And in the they look at, the other force. I'm not talking about ancient times when we had proper armies. This year, and when the colonialism started, this was the situation. They look at the size, whichever is the smaller army, they'll just turn tail and walk off. So there was no fighting. So then there are a lot of, once this volume back, the quarrel between the states are over, these are jobless, no pension, nothing. There are a lot of footloose mercenaries there going around. So for them, fighting was an honorable profession. And when the French started it first, actually recruiting, and then they found they were paid properly, they're trained, and they could win battles. They were very happy. And the French or the British, as far as they were concerned, they just wanted to place. That was the behavior of the Nawabs in this thing. Just give you one example, sorry for going so long. This Plassey said it was nothing. Buxar was where the Mughal Empire was destroyed. There, 40,000 soldiers there assembled, so-called soldiers, the Mughal combined armies of Nawab of Oudh and Nawab of Bengal and Shah of Mughal Empire. Hector Munro had 6,000 sepoys and 1,000 Europeans. That's all. 7,000, about 40,000. And in 1 hour the battle was over, the Mughal army was routed. This was the kind of rabble they were assembling, whereas these men, they found, it's good, we can win wars. And most of these wars, initial stages, won by South Indians and Biharis, incidentally, when they started recruiting. Biharis were thrown out after the 1857 revolt. But once this theatre of war shifted north and northwestward, this was not a time when troops could be airlifted. This is bullock carts, it took, in fact, for the campaign against Tipu Sultan, it took almost near to assemble people from, various places in Nadu and Maharashtra to Seringapatam. This was the situation. So they found it's highly uneconomical to take troops from all the way to south to this place. Instead, they sent the Madras army to Burma. I don't know how many of you know that the entire Burma was conquered by Madras army. Madras army went up to Manila and much before the US Marines landed in the Philippines, they took it. So then they went north and they found it is, Punjabis are nearer, they were more suited by climate also for that area. They started, so they wanted to appease them. They made up this Marshall theory, Marshall devices theory.
It is purely a divide and
It is no scientific base, nothing. Now it is accepted. South Indians, meanwhile, education had developed here, and since they were not recruiting into the army, they looked for other avenues, maybe migrated to Burma and things like that. And soldiering, the interest in soldiering waned. That is what, and that continues today. This is what happened. But there is nothing called martial races as such. They're all good, and as many battles are proving now. Thank you.
Okay, this one question on what challenges did you face while researching this book, particularly in uncovering and interpreting historical records for the resistance movements?
I can get you.
What challenges did you face in the research?
Oh, I see. Yeah, challenges I did face because, what we generally get is outline stories. But to make a story interesting, we got to go into more how exactly, where it happened. For example, I grew up in Travancore. I knew about a bit of Travancore history, about Velutambi Talava. That's one of the chapters. How did he end? How was his end? So I had to go to the Travancore Gazette, like for Raja of Coorg, I had to go to the Mysore Gazette. The Archaeological Survey of India library, like that, you have to dig. You cannot just find information without doing that. That was the challenge.
Okay, the next one is on how do you think the legacy of these southern Indian resistance icons should influence our understanding of India's broader struggle for independence? Is there a direct impact on our struggle for independence? Okay, let me just explain this. What were these icons fighting for? Independence. To preserve their sovereignty, to preserve their freedom, and to preserve their way of life. The British were wanting to collect taxes from them and literally looting that. So they were wanting to preserve each palayam's, each region's independence. So if you really understand the India's freedom movement, it must start from here, from the 17th century, when the first resistance movements from polygars started off against the East India Company, or from the time the Nawab of Arcot allowed the East India Company to collect taxes on their behalf, and the resistance started from there.
I think that answers.
Okay. In what ways did the resistance in southern India differ from the more commonly recognized struggles in other parts of the country, like the battles in northern India?
In what way? Did it differ?
Differ from northern.
Resistance movement is a kind which took, I'm talking about resistance movement, not about independence struggles. And many of these, media journalists, they confuse. For example, there was this big controversy going on. Tipu Sultan was a freedom fighter, one side saying, the other side saying that, he was a religious bigot or whatever. Being a politically neutral person, I would say he was neither. He was basically a product of the times. He was one of those seeking power and territory. So wherever sort of brutality against the invaded was part of the invasions in those days. For example, he was trounced by this, what they call Nayar Patalam in Trichur, the Nayar army of Travancore. So he had a grudge against Nayars. He couldn't take it out against them, but he went to Malabar, he took it out against them. Same thing happened when he fought against Coors rather. Coors, they were good fighters and they are still. So when Coors invaded, he did the same thing there. It's like that. Otherwise, he used to do pujas at the Raghunath Swami temple before going for war. There was nothing called religious bigotry or something. He had to do what everyone was doing. So he was no freedom fighter. He was a freedom fighter. Just to add one more thing on that, one of the greatest thinkers of those times was Madhav Sindhi, who was a Maratha statesman. He had sent word around all these rulers around Nizam, Mysore, Tipu Sultan, various people, let's get together against this. Tipu Sultan didn't join it because he was a Hindu. So this sort of division in our country.
We were fragmented.
Huh?
We were fragmented.
We were fragmented in various, either religion, caste, region. We were just not a nation. That is what happened.
You had Hyder Ali supporting British against the
Yeah.
Peshwa supporting the British against somebody else. So this kind of a fragmentation is what was the problem, really speaking. But everybody was fighting for their, preserving their independence.
So how did the fight in South differ? It was bitter. It stalled the British a lot. British couldn't just make a cakewalk like they did in the North. They paid in blood.
But studying history, I just want to end with one few points here. We need to study this history and we need to understand few larger dimensions of, because it is not only about Indian history. The colonization has a lot of other influences and implications that played into how the colonization started. When they came in as traders, the Portuguese were pirates, the British and the Dutch, etc., came begging for trade. And what could they sell us? We didn't want anything from them. Literally, because India and China were exporting a lot to rest of the world. And they were looking for those spices, textiles, indigo, a whole lot of things. So, if you look at the trade pattern, so by then the Henry the Navigator from Lisbon, last year I went and saw the museum there, wonderful. And Henry the Navigator started off that process in the 14th century. And then when Columbus reached and discovered the new land, thinking that it was India, There is a fine book of American history called People's History of America, written by Howard Zins. It was written in the 60s or 50s. And that actually is a more neutral and truthful analysis of what these guys did when they went there. So as the colonization, they found that these are worlds that they could capture easily because of the gunpowder revolution advantage that they had. So they picked up their strategies from there. That's one. And then the American colonies started before Indian colonization started. So the Virginia and Maryland came up. And when who were the people who moved? There was a population boom in Europe and England particularly, a serious poverty, lack of employment. So the king started pushing people to go and work in plantations where the elites had gone and occupied some of the lands in Virginia and Maryland. And therefore these were the people who went as indentured laborers and some of them as enslaved as well. They were both whites and British citizens as well as the African American people. So in the early 1600s till date of 1664, there was no difference between white and African origin people or no color consciousness at all. It wasn't there. Right? So they had the same rights. The contract, it was a contract system. The indenture period was for 9 years to 15 years or whatever it is. And then they were free. And even an African descent person, when he becomes free, he could stand for, political office, or he could, do his own business. There was nothing stopped. And intermarriage between blacks and whites were common at that point. Somewhere along the line, a rebellion took place by all these workers, both blacks and whites included. And that rebellion in Virginia carried on in 1676 for an entire year. And that shook up the British. They were both British colonies, shook up the British colonial past. And they said this cannot happen. That's when they brought in the law that you cannot intermarry. Whites will have privileges after the end of their indenture. They can actually you have to provide them guns and you have to provide them wealth. And the blacks did not have that option. And from there on, the slavery process started. So the white supremacy, the whiteness, and this is being researched very well now. There are some excellent scholars who are coming out in these discussions. And I picked up a book called 1619 Project, which is actually shaken up. All this comes under critical race theory. And therefore, when you now revisit history, this is an important milestone that impacts colonization in the rest of the world. That white supremacy, Christian evangelism that says Christianity is way above, others are uncivilized, you have a civilizing mission, and this is transported in the way of dealing with people. And you will see this change, because this happened in 1681 in Virginia, Columbia. You will see this change as British East India Company starts dealing with Indians. Madras was built in the 17th century, in the 1640s something. You won't hear of these kind of behavior, but in the 1740s, 1750s, 1780s, you'll hear this. You hear this behavior. And that mindset has actually influenced a lot. And history teaching and understanding is also influenced because these people have written the history. We need to understand this process to actually discover what we want to understand.
To add one thing to what he said, you'll be very surprised to learn that the first slaves were not Africans. They were the British. They were stolen from the hinterland, taken to Bristol. I went there, I went and saw the place where they had the ships and where the white slaves were taken. So the first slaves who went were were white men, and then of course black, brown, everyone.
Thank you for that invigorating Q&A session. And I now request Group Captain Vijay Kumar to present a memento to the Chief Guest and other dignitaries on behalf of MMA.
Again, before all, we give you only books to read. It's a lovely book to write. The turning point.
you very much. It's a pleasure meeting you.
I now request Captain Ramachandran to present a memento to our chief guest, Dr. Nanditha Krishna. I now request Captain Ramachandran to present a memento to our special speaker for the event, Air Marshal M Matheswaran.